Okay. Hello everyone. Today I have here Toronto's very own Desmond Cole. You have probably seen him in your civic class videos or on television speaking about social issues in Toronto. He is a well-known community worker and freelance journalist, as well as one of the staff writers for Toronto's. How are you doing, Mr. Phil?
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. My first question for you is, for the people who do not know, what is racism and how does this play a role in carding?
Oh, it's such a big question.
Yeah.
I think that usually the way that people define racism, Jamal, is that they say it's when one group of people or one person hates another group of people, like actively hates them, like says, I hate you, I want to hurt you, calls people like names that are based on race or based on the way that somebody looks. And I think that that's usually what people think racism is. And it is.
Yeah.
But that's not the only thing that racism is, right? It goes well beyond that. And the way, for me, that racism has something to do with carding, which is when the police stop innocent people on the street and ask them for their ID and put that ID in a database, is that happens to somebody who looks like me or you far often than it happens to people who look a lot of different ways in the city, whether they be South Asian or whether they be East Asian, whether they be white European, whether they be South American.
Exactly.
We know by the statistics that when the police decide to stop any old person in the street and start asking them for ID, that they're more likely to ask a black person, and specifically a black male, more than anybody else. I think that that's racism. I can explain more why as we go on, because I know that for some people they might not think that that's racism, they might think all kind of other things about that, but to me that is absolutely racism, because what you're doing is you're following a stereotype.
Yes.
You're saying the police should, first of all, you're saying I have a certain thought about black people and what they do, and because of my thought about what black people do, I think that the police should treat them a specific way different from how they treat everybody else. And to me, that's racism.
Exactly. Well, I think that one of the many issues people face is that they don't know, like you said, the true story about racism, what it really is, who it really affects, and what certain systems are put into play in modern day societies that are labeled as certain things as carding and proactive policing, those kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
But really that's for a ideological idea behind it, but we're going to go further into that. So my second question for you is, what is the alleged reason of carding, or the meaning of it in police terms?
So the police are telling us that the reason that they go up to people in the street and talk to them and try to take their personal information is that they're trying to keep the community safe.
Yeah.
Now, at a very basic level, I accept that. I accept that almost every single person who joins the police force is doing it because they're a good person and because they want to keep everybody safe. Okay? But here's the problem. You and I and everybody else in Canada have a Charter of Rights and Freedoms. That's the highest law of this country. And that law tells our courts and our police and our public institutions and everybody in Canada how we are allowed to be treated, right? So the law of Canada, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, says one very important thing. It says a lot of things, but one very important thing it says is that everyone is to be free from arbitrary detention by the police. That means that the police can't just see me going about my business, walking down the road, and come and say, listen, you need to stay here, you need to talk to us. The only time that the police in Canada are allowed to do that is if there's a crime that's been committed, or that they believe is about to be committed, and that they specifically believe that me, Desmond, that I am involved in the crime that is about to be committed, or is being committed, or was just committed. And they can't just be like, well, there's a guy. Like, they have to have information that I'm a suspect in the crime.
Exactly.
So if you and I are walking down Queen Street here and a building is burning, the police can't just assume that because you and I are walking near the building that we set it on fire, right?
Exactly.
But that's the problem with the way that the police are saying that they're keeping us safe, is that what they're doing has nothing to do with evidence or police work. Just stopping people on the street because they happen to be walking around does not tell us anything about that person being a suspect to a crime. So I want the police to keep people safe, but I want them to do it by presenting evidence when they think that something is wrong, and by talking only to the specific people who they have evidence about, basically.
Okay. And this question is for some individuals out there that may think that carding is proactive policing, or I heard some pretty out of this world comments when it comes to this doesn't happen in Toronto, and it's based on your appearance and you bring that upon yourself. But for the people who believe that carding is proactive policing and the cops only card thugs, quote unquote, what do you have to say to that?
Well, I mean, first of all, no one is a thug, so I reject the term. I know I'm not a thug, and I've been stopped by the police more times than I can count.
Exactly.
I wrote a Toronto Life piece saying that I've had over 50 negative interactions with the police, and that's the truth. You know, that's my situation. That's not because I'm a thug. But again, like, I want to make something very clear to people, and that is that the police investigating a specific crime and carding are not the same thing. The police investigating a specific crime is like, fine, we heard that there was a robbery, we heard that somebody who looks like this ran away from the store, and we're looking for that person. That's not the same as what carding is. Carding is, you're going to the store, you're walking down the street, you're going to school, you're coming from work, you're driving a car, and the police just for no reason, they don't, and they admit, oh, it's not that we suspect that you're doing anything.
They just want information.
We just want information. Well, in a free country, I don't have to give the police my information.
That's you have the right to say no.
You have the right to say no, and they shouldn't be asking you. Because what our police are doing is, they're keeping a whole database of people's information, even though they say, we don't really suspect them of any crime. What this reminds me of is the movie Minority Report, where what you do is you say, you could commit a crime in the future. I'm not saying you're doing anything wrong now, but what if you do something in the future? Yeah, so maybe then the police should have cameras in my bedroom to make sure that when I go home, I'm not doing anything wrong. Or maybe the police should just be able to walk into my house whenever they feel like it, just to make sure that I'm not doing anything wrong. But of course, in a free country, you can't do that.
Exactly.
So I reject the idea that harassing innocent people and bothering them when you don't have any business with them is good policing. I think it's bad policing. And the fact that police target black people more often is not because black people are bad or more criminal. It's because there are stereotypes about black people that the police have and that our society has. It's the way we're being treated that's the problem. It's not what we're doing.
Okay, so for this whole issue of carding and racism, why is this issue happening in Toronto, and why is it important to everyone, just not the black community?
The reason it's happening in Toronto is because we have stereotypes about black people in Toronto, just like there are stereotypes about black people all across North America. There are lots of different kinds of racism, right? And when people talk about anti-black racism, they're talking about the specific negative ways in which our white-dominated society has viewed black people and has treated them over time. So why is this happening in Toronto? It's because, quite simple, we live in a racist society. And when I say that, I know that people's feelings get hurt because they think I'm saying that everybody is a racist. I'm not saying that everybody is a racist. I'm saying that the dominant ideas that go around in our society, we are not the in-group.
Exactly.
We are the people who are always put on the outside. That doesn't mean that everyone is doing it,
exactly.
But it often, even sometimes, Jamal, what I find really interesting about this stuff is that, like, it can also even just be like, you hear a racist comment against a black person, and you don't say anything. You go to the movies, and there's a really big stereotype in the movie about a black character, and you just laugh because you're used to the stereotype. Well, making stereotypes about a black person in a movie is racism. But it's not the same as that other racism I was talking about where you're going after somebody and being like calling them a word. That's the only type of racism that people ever think about. But there's daily instances of racism in our city and in our country. And we still ask ourselves in 2015, well, do you think there's racism in Canada? Like, of course there is. The only proof that I need that racism still exists in this country is that the indigenous people who were here before everyone else in this country are not running everything. And in fact, there's all kinds of stereotypes about them and why they are poor and why they are disadvantaged in our communities.
Exactly. So
I know that Canada was founded on racism, and all of that continues to echo on to where we are right now.
Thank you. So next question for you. How can we change this policy of carding since we can't get rid of it anytime soon?
There's really two things that I want from the police when it comes to carding. And I would stop complaining about this issue and move on to other things in my life. The police would just do two things.
Yeah.
The first one is, if you and I are arrested by the police, what do they have to do? Do you know?
Read us our rights.
They have to read us our rights, exactly. They have to say, you're under arrest for X, and they have to tell you why you're under arrest. You have the right to remain silent. You have the right to an attorney. Anything you say can be used against you in court, but you have the right not to talk. They have to tell you all of these things. So think about it. If I'm not under arrest, why can't you just tell me that?
Exactly.
That's the first thing I want from the police. If you can give a person who's suspected of a crime all of their rights, why won't you give an innocent person their rights? Why won't you tell them, hey, I'd like to talk to you right now, but you are not under arrest, you're free to go, you don't have to actually talk to me if you don't want to. That's the first thing. That's how we reform this practice. That's the most important thing, because the police shouldn't be doing their jobs without telling us what they're doing. The police are employees of the public. They're not there to tell me what to do.
They're here to serve for us citizens.
Yeah, they say to serve and protect on the side of their card, don't they? To serve and protect me. So that means that if you're going to serve me, you have to tell me what you're doing. So if you want to talk to me, just tell me why. That's the first thing. Tell me if I'm free to go or if I'm under arrest. The second thing is, if you're going to take any of my personal information, even though I'm not suspected of a crime, give me a receipt. Give me a receipt. Would you go to replace your health card and expect that they're not going to show you what they're putting on your card? They're going to give you a copy, right?
Exactly.
If you go to any government service and you do business with the government, they're going to give you a record of what they did with you that day. The police are the only ones who think that they can take all my information and not explain why or what they're doing with it. And I think that's wrong. They should be giving a receipt. If you want my personal information, but I'm not suspected of a crime, show me exactly what information you're taking about me and give me a receipt. That's the second thing.
It's pretty simple if you think about it. You're not getting a receipt and they're taking statistics based on those people they are carding. You didn't sign a contract or anything saying that they're allowed to release that information, and they do release this information, and it is published in our media, and our media tends to focus it on black youth in certain areas, and they all happen to be always Toronto community housing areas in the city.
But remember, if the police are the ones deciding that those are the people whose information that they want, then that's how it's going to reflect on the community.
Right.
The other thing that I should really mention that I don't think I have yet is that the police have a database of all of this information. It doesn't just go into a book somewhere. If you get stopped over here and the police talk to you and you're not under arrest or anything, but they take all your information, they put it in a computer. And that computer can be accessed by every single other of the thousands of officers in this city. But my question is, if you weren't doing anything wrong, why do 5,000 police officers need to know that you got stopped here at this time and that you were talking to the police? Unless you were doing something wrong, there's no reason for everybody to know that. And so the database of all our information for years that the police have been collecting, I want that database destroyed because it has no valid purpose.
Exactly. I'm pretty speechless after that one. So another question for you is: a successful young Black Canadian, are you still affected by carding? If so, and what is your most vivid experience for those people who probably think that, Desmond Cole's on TV, there's no way that he can experience this because cops and everyone will know who he is. Like, he should be that one guy that's in the in-group. But you're never in the in-group, so I want you to explain that question for me, for those people out there who think elsewise.
Well, I get carded a lot less now than I did 10 years ago, that's for sure. And I'm sure that a lot of people who are around here recognize who I am and don't necessarily want to do that to me anymore, right? So, because they know that I'm going to be on the 6 o'clock news telling a story about it, right? But, no, I mean, I'll give you an example. During the G20, I was carded a lot of times, actually, and I was just trying to do my job as a reporter. Now, again, I know people will say, oh, well, that was a different scenario, it was the G20. Look, as a Black person, for me, that was like all the other times that it's happened. It doesn't make any difference.
You just got more armor.
Yeah, there were just more cops and more opportunities to do it to me, right? So I got to stop it, and I got asked for my information during the G20, and I refused. I told the officers I didn't need to give them my information, and I was even probably rude to them, because I'm just so tired of having this happen to me.
Exactly.
But it does happen. It happens to people who are poor. It happens to people who have tons of money, who are Black. It happens to people who are not Black too. But the reason I keep talking about Black people is because it happens to us disproportionately. Black people in Toronto are 8% of the population. We're 8%.
That's a small percent.
It's not a big number. We were 27% of the people carded in 2013. Now, I want to answer a question that you haven't asked, but every time I give these stats, I think it's fair to say this, because people will say, well, aren't Black people committing more crimes, Desmond? And I have two answers to that. The first one is, no, I don't have any statistics showing that Black people are committing more crimes. Our police don't keep those kind of statistics. But it's interesting how people have that idea all the time.
Thank you.
But number two, where in the world, let me ask you, where in the world is your family from? Where's your background?
Dad's from Ghana, mom's from Grenada.
Okay,
so South American and Caribbean.
Okay, my parents are from Sierra Leone in West Africa.
Okay.
But we would both be called Black.
Yeah.
So what does you being Black and me being Black have to do with the way we behave? Nothing.
Okay.
Nothing. But people will put us in a category. That's why I say it's racism.
Yeah.
Because you and I don't even have the same part of the world. Like now, if we go back far enough,
We do.
every single person is from Africa.
Exactly.
But in the immediate past,
I'm not.
we're not. But we're being put into the same group of people who are saying, oh, but maybe they're committing more crime, maybe they're doing this. And we're not even part of the same group. And so we're being put into a group. And that is exactly why I say it's racist, because you're looking at people who have dark-colored skin and assuming that they must all act the same. And there's no better definition of racism to me than that.
Okay. So for this following question, what role can our government on all levels play to change the policy of carding, or at least give strict requirements before an officer can do so? So you mentioned your two policy. What levels do you think this should be brought upon? Because city level, we know Mayor Tory's side where he stands on things, and he's conservative, so he's right-wing political.
Well,
leader.
I don't think that this is a right or left-wing issue, and I also know that a lot of Black people supported John Tory and were really surprised when he supported carding. But I never think that things are set in stone with politicians. They're there to serve us, not the other way around. They don't tell us what to do. We tell them. That's why we elect them. We don't just elect them and say, have a nice 4 years. So if John Tory is not doing what people in the community think that he should be doing, it's all of our jobs to get together and tell him to stop. So if John Tory doesn't listen, then we have to go to the province and to the premier. And we will. We're going to keep fighting this no matter who it takes. And you asked earlier why this is an important issue for everybody. It's because if the police can say that everybody has a charter right not to be detained by the police unless you're Black, or unless you live in a poor neighborhood, and then we can stop you whenever we feel like it. then it would only be a matter of time before the police will come after